I am Angelo Sada, and we are belong with the Group 1. I'll be presenting the taxation in the Philippines, its historical development. This is the topic includes: first, definition of tax; second, the importance of characteristic of taxes; third, the theory of taxation; fourth, the power of taxation; fifth, the purpose of taxation; sixth, the importance of taxation; seventh is the nature of taxation; and lastly, the constitutional limitation of tax. But before we're going to proceed our topic, let's think about it. What are taxes? Yes, taxes. I know there's a lot of us know what is taxes or what taxes purpose are. So, let's proceed our topic. What are tax or taxes? Taxes are the enforced proportional contribution from the person and the property lived by the state and brought to by the sovereignty for the support of the government and for all the public needs and purposes. A tax is a charge by the government on the income of an individual, corporations, or trust, as well as the value of the estates or a gift. The objective in assessing the tax is to generate revenue to use for the needs of the public. The essential characteristic of a tax are that it is not a voluntary payment or a donation, but an enforced contribution exacted pursuant to the legislative authority. So now we know what is the meaning of the tax, or what is the purpose of the tax. So the tax is not a voluntary payment or a donation payment, because the donation payment is from your heart, and it's okay if you will not to give, and it's okay if how much you pay. And the voluntary payment is also you volunteer yourself to pay this one. That is the meaning of not tax, because if you have voluntary payment, that is not a tax, because a tax is you have an obligation to pay the contributions and exact, because this is the demand for all of us. Even though you are students, even though you're older teachers, because we have an obligation to pay the tax for the things that we need. That's all for my introductions, and let's proceed to the next reporter, Monica Shane. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I'm Monica Shane Galio from BS Ed Philippine 1B. Now, I will discuss the important characteristic of taxes. Taxation should follow the four principles: fairness, certainty, convenience, and efficiency. Fairness in that taxation should be compatible with taxpayer conditions, including their ability to pay in line with personal and family needs. Certainly should mean that taxpayers are clearly informed about why and how taxes are levied. Convenience relates to the ease of compliance of the taxpayer, how simple is process of collecting or paying taxes. Finally, efficiency touches on how collection of taxes. Basically put, the administration of tax collection should not negatively affect the allocation and use of resources in the economy, and certainly shouldn't cost more than taxes themselves.
The theory of the taxation. Several theories of taxation exist in public economics. Governments at all levels, national, regional, and local, need to raise revenue from a variety of sources to finance public sector expenditures. Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, 1776 wrote, Such things as defending the country and maintaining the institution of good government are of general benefit to the public. Thus, it is reasonable that the population as a whole should contribute to the tax cost. It is also reasonable to demand certain other things of a tax system, for example, that the amounts of tax individuals pay should bear some relationship to their abilities to pay. Good taxes meet four major criteria. They are, first, proportionate to incomes or abilities to pay. Second, certain rather than arbitrary. Third, payable at times and in ways convenient to the taxpayers. And fourth, cheap to administer and collect. In modern public finance literature, there have been two main issues: who can pay and who can benefit. Benefit principle. Influential theories have been the ability theory presented by Arthur Cecil Figo and the benefit theory developed by Eric Lida. There is a later version of the benefit theory known as the voluntary exchange theory. Under the benefit theory, tax level are automatically determined because taxpayers pay proportionately for the government benefits they receive. In other words, the individuals who benefit the most from public service pay the most taxes.
The purposes and importance of taxation. The purpose of taxation is undoubtedly to raise revenues of funds to support the government in its services. Taxation is also utilized as a tool to carry out the national objective of social and economic development. There has two purposes of taxation. The first one is the primary purpose. It is to provide funds or property with which to promote the general welfare of its citizens and to enable it to finance its multifarious activities. And the second one is the secondary purposes. The secondary purposes is to strengthen anemic enterprises by giving tax exemption and to protect local industries against foreign competition through imposition of high customs duties on imported goods, and to reduce inequalities in wealth and income by imposing progressively higher taxes, and to prevent inflation by increasing taxes or ward off depression by decreasing taxes. The importance of taxation derives from the unavoidable and inevitable obligation of the government to protect the people and extend them benefits in the form of public projects and services. In return, the people are subjected to the reciprocal duty of sharing the expenses in the form of taxes. The most important purpose of taxation is to raise resources for government to deliver essential public services. Taxes pay for many of the things that are fundamental to functioning societies around the world, such as healthcare, schools, and social services.
The nature of the power of taxation. Taxation partakes of the following nature, namely, first, the power of taxation is an inherent power. Being indispensable in the existence and function of the government, it is inherent because it exists without the necessity of any specific grant of the power by the Constitution. Just like the police power and the power of eminent domain, the power of taxation exists independently of the Constitution. Second, is the taxing power is essentially a legislative function even in the absence of an express constitutional grant. The power of taxation falls on the legislative branch of government as part of the more general power of lawmaking. It is inherent in sovereignty. The power of taxation exists independent of any legislation. There is no need to enact a law to exercise that power because that power springs at the moment you have the
existence of the state. This is inherent because this is based on necessity.
The constitutional limitation of taxation. The power of taxation is subject to constitutional and inherent limitations. The limitations to the power of taxations that are embodied and categorically stated in the Constitution itself are the following. Observance of due process of law. Section 1, Article 3, Bill of Rights. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied the equal protection of the laws. Due process requires that the procedures by which laws are applied must be even-handed, so that individuals are not subjected to the arbitrary exercise of government power. Exactly what procedures are needed to satisfy due process, however, will vary depending on the circumstances and subject matter involved. Due process, a course of legal proceedings according to rules and principles that have been established in a system of jurisprudence for the enforcement and protection of private rights. In each case, due process contemplates an exercise of the power of government as the law permits and sanctions, under recognized safeguards for the protection of individual rights. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, known as the Bill of Rights, guarantee essential rights and civil liberties, such as the right to free speech, the right to bear arms, and the right to a fair trial, as well as protecting the role of the states in American government. Observance of equal protection of the laws. Section 1, Article 3, Bill of Rights. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied the equal protection of the laws. All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. The principle of equality and non-discrimination guarantees that those in equal circumstances are dealt with equally in law and practice. However, it is important to stress that not every distinction or difference in treatment will amount to discrimination. Prohibition against imprisonment for non-payment of full tax. Section 20, Article 3, Bill of Rights. No person shall be imprisoned for debt or non-payment of a full tax. The prime duty of the government is to serve and protect the people. The government may call upon the people to defend the state, and in the fulfillment thereof, all citizens may be required, under conditions provided by law, to render personal, military, or civil services. Prohibition against impairment of obligation of contracts. Section 10, Article 3, Bill of Rights. No law impairing the obligation of contracts shall be passed. The power of taxation cannot be exercised in a manner that would impair the obligation of contracts. What is prohibited is that a taxing statute be passed that would alter the relative rights of the parties with each other. The mere fact that a tax makes the conduct of a business more expensive or makes an activity more difficult does not result in the impairment of the obligation of contracts. Contract is impaired only if the relative position of the parties to a contract, equality that is assumed when the contract was entered into, is disturbed by the operation of a taxing statute. Application. An example of impairment by law is when a tax exemption based on a contract is revoked by a later taxing statute, but exemption from taxation provided for in a franchise, although in a sense is an exemption based on a contract, may be revoked because under the Constitution, a franchise is subject to immediate alteration or repeal by the Congress. Section 11, Article 7. The obligation of a contract is impaired when its term or condition are changed by law or by a party without the consent of the other, thereby weakening the position or rights of the latter. An example of impairment by law is when a later taxing statute revokes a tax exemption based on a contract, but this only applies when the tax exemption has been granted for a valid consideration. A latter statute may revoke exemption from taxation provided for in a franchise because the Constitution provides that a franchise is subject to amendment, alteration, or repeal. The parties to the contract cannot exercise the power of taxation.
Requirement of uniformity and equity in taxation. Section 28, Article 6, Legislative Department. The rule of taxation shall be uniform and equitable. The Congress shall evolve a progressive system of taxation. The Congress may by law authorize the President to fix within specified limits and subject to such limitations and restrictions as it may impose tariff rates, import and export routes, tonnage and whartage dues, other duties or impose with the framework of the National Development Program of Government. Charitable institutions, churches, and personage or convents appertinent thereto, mosques, non-profit cemeteries, and all lands, buildings, and all improvements actually directly and exclusively used for religious, charitable, or educational purposes shall be exempt from taxation. Prohibitions against taxations appropriations for religious purposes. Section 29, Paragraph 2, Article 5, Legislative Department. Number public money or property shall be appropriated, applied, paid, or employed directly or indirectly for the use, benefit, or support of any seats, church, denominations, sectarians, institution or system or religions, or any priest, preachers, minister, or dignitary is assigned to the armed forces, or to any penal institutions, or government orphanage or leprosarium. Prohibitions against taxations of religious, charitable, and educational entities. Religious and charitable institutions are exempt from property taxes. Section 28, Article 6, Legislative Department. Charitable institutions, churches, and personages or convents appertinent thereto, mosques, non-profit, cemeteries, and all lands, buildings, and improvements actually directly and exclusively used for religious, charitable, or educational purposes shall be exempt from taxation. Prohibitions against taxations of non-stock or non-profit educational institutions and proprietary educational institutions, non-stock and non-profit educational institutions. Proprietary educational institutions are exempt from property and income taxes as well as customs duties exempt income derived from business activity not related to its educational purposes. Section 28, Article 6, Legislative Department. Charitable institutions, churches, and personage or convents appertinent thereto, mosques, non-profit, cemeteries, and all lands, buildings, and improvements actually directly and exclusively used for religious, charitable, or educational purposes shall be exempted from taxations.
Taxation in the Philippines, its historical development. Leader, Angela Lozada. Members, Monica Shane Gallo, Zaira Bandejas, Letly Valenzuela, Ivy Villagracia, Lester Siscar, and Anabea Amos.